Hello, welcome, zombie fans. This is Reanimated, episode 110, 110. My name is Stuart Tiffin. I am being joined by the inimitable H.A. Conrad. Hello.
Hello.
We are talking still this week about Outcast, the first season of Robert Kirkman's latest comic book slash television project. So we'll be continuing our review with episode 5, which is entitled The Road Before Us. Before we get to that, we will do a roundup of zombie and horror news, as we tend to do.
So first up is there is going to be in anticipation of season 7 of The Walking Dead. There is going to be a geocache trail that is going to be popping up, and it will be in Georgia. And this will be launched by the Chamber of Commerce in Meriwether County. So it's going to be called the Real Woodbury Zombie GeoQuest. And sort of, for anybody who hasn't done this before, it's like a scavenger hunt. And you can use GPS and probably, I'm sure there will be apps and other things, like basically like treasure maps and that kind of thing, to discover different items and containers. Hopefully nobody will run off with them, but I kind of suspect there will be some pilfering related to this quest. What do you think?
Well, it depends what kind of fans they bring in and what kind of stuff they have.
Right. And they're doing this sort of like it's sort of like a fun thing. I've done a little bit of geocaching. There's like a few different places that have done it, and for the most part, people are pretty respectful. So the whole idea is that you find the item and then you log in. Like there's a little logbook and you write it down, and then you kind of put it back so other people can enjoy it. But in a lot of cases, people actually take the item. So, and I kind of feel like Walking Dead is a little bit open to that because people really like their souvenirs and that kind of thing. But hopefully hopefully everybody will behave. But there will actually be, because there's a town of Woodbury in Meriwether County. That's kind of what they're springing off of here for this kind of adventure. So
Maybe they won't even have items, and it'll just be like, oh yeah, you found the church from season 5 or something.
maybe, but the whole point is to have the items, and you kind of find little like a mystery container and all that fun stuff. So
Well,
I
if
don't know.
if the only item there is, say, the logbook and the view,
Maybe you
I
can't
would. I'm
take the
just
view.
suggesting. I'm just suggesting that as an alternative to, yeah.
Yeah.
Here's a one in a million,
Right.
bottle opener or whatever. I don't know what
Right.
you're gonna say.
And speaking of Walking Dead season 7, there's been a few articles now that have come out, and we'll put links to one of them in the show notes about the fact that there are now 20 regular cast members listed, at least for the 7th season. And my reaction to this is that there's probably going to be a lot of people that will die this season, but I don't know if you had another reaction.
Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be a culling. 20 people. I mean, some of these are Negans, and some of
I
these are
know.
Gregorys, and people who aren't like part of the group. So much easier
Off them.
to thin out the herd with guys like that. But yeah, just even of our core group, we know that somebody's dead. At least we hope so. Which is probably not good. That's my opinion about the show, is that they need to start killing more people.
Well, and according to John Carpenter, which is our next little tidbit, he is really annoyed and not a fan of The Walking Dead, and he made a few comments. He's been making the rounds in terms of like interviews and things like that recently.
What's
So
coming up for him? He must have a project
he
coming
must
up.
have something coming up because I've seen, I think he did an interview with Mark Maron recently. But in any case, he made some comments about The Walking Dead and basically just said it's a complete ripoff of Romero's concept and that they need to just, it's milking it. He thinks that there's going to be something else in the future that will be a resurgence of like horror films and that kind of thing, though he doesn't offer exactly what that might be. I wonder if you had any conjecture on that.
No, and honestly, Carpenter's had. I have to wonder if this isn't just like sour grapes, because he's had his hits and his misses. This is
He's
a
had a
hit.
lot of misses.
This is a hit that has its own misses built in, but it's like it wouldn't still be on the air if it was a total bomb. So you got to just kind of respect that.
I agree. I mean, I do think he has a point with Fear the Walking Dead, perhaps, because I do find that to be a big miss for me personally, and I don't think I'm the only one who thinks that. But I think for the regular series, I don't. I am very much looking forward to season 7. And I think many people are, and clearly many people are, given the viewing numbers. But perhaps sour grapes. But I'm always curious to see what people think maybe the next thing, if you will, especially in the horror world. And I was kind of hoping he would give more than just sort of a blanket, broad generalization in terms of that. I wanted to see a prediction, and maybe he will at some point. But
Well, that maybe that's his next project is this new thing that nobody's ever been terrified of before, and
maybe.
he's gonna. But yeah,
Wait, oh, he was also very down on Paranormal Activity. Did you ever watch that series of films?
not all of them, but yeah, I've seen some of them.
I only watched the first one, and I kind of felt like the gimmick ended there. But having not seen the other ones, I guess I can't really attest to that.
Right. It's a
Clearly,
genius idea.
it was a genius idea, and I really think that given the budget that they had in the first film, in terms of what they did with it, was very classic horror in terms of leaving a lot of things to the imagination. And, so I don't really agree with Mr. Carpenter on that point because I feel like that was definitely a film that was made in the spirit of a true horror genre film. You know what I mean? Like there were a lot of things they did there, and no, it wasn't. Was it a perfect film? No, it did have a lot of flaws. Yes, but that's kind of the point in some ways. So, anyway, perhaps you're correct. Sour grapes. And do you want to talk about the last tidbit?
What's the last one? Oh,
It
The
is,
Cell.
yeah,
Or just Cell, rather. The Cell
yeah,
being the awesome Jennifer Lopez movie that
right,
will never be, can never be duplicated.
right.
Cell, though, as you reminded me, was a novel that Stephen King wrote, what, 2 years ago? Around?
It was more than that, I think.
Was it that long ago?
Yeah, and I read this when it first came out, and it had to be because I was living in Boston at the time.
Okay.
And part of it, so a lot of this book is based in Boston, and it was a little freaky to read some of these things and to have that knowledge of the town and the geography and things like that.
Right.
So 2006 is when it came out.
Okay.
So, and this is a film adaptation, and I had not, I think I heard a little bit about this when they were first doing it. And you didn't read the book, correct?
No, we have not.
Okay. I think it's kind of a fun summer read, but it definitely, as with many Stephen King books, there's like really good parts and just parts that you're like, oh, really? And I think that the concept of this has been done before and done in different ways. So it was interesting to me that they decided to do a film. And it does have a pretty, I mean, John Cusack and Samuel L. Jackson, and there's like a few other people in this. Like the cast isn't terrible, but it's not getting the best reviews
Not so far.
so far. And there's been, there's such headlines as "Is Cell the worst Stephen King adaptation of all time?"
Well, with press like that, how can they go wrong?
I don't know. Would you be willing to see it despite the press?
Yeah, of course. But I feel like if we're going to see this and review it, and I think we should, I think, though, we should actually go back in time to, and I'm trying to find out when this film came out, but The Signal, have you ever seen it?
I may have seen it. Yes, I feel like I did, and that's what it reminded me of when I was,
Well,
that's
yeah.
what I'm talking about, I think. Hang on, let me remind myself of who is in The
It looks
Signal.
like it came out actually in 2008. That's when I'm seeing all the reviews. But there's also another film called The Signal that came out more recently in 2014. So not to be confused with that version.
Ah, okay.
That's a sci-fi, and I haven't seen that one either.
No, this was definitely something that seemed to be closer to this premise.
Yeah.
The premise of which things are being passed along via mobile phones.
Yeah,
Um,
or another film that might remind you of this is the M Night Shyamalan. What was it called? The one about the trees.
yeah, yeah, you're right.
Uh,
I don't remember, but I know
all
I
of a vein.
yeah. Um, but anyway, I something that's getting this terrible of a rating, part of me kind of wants to see it.
Yeah, that too.
So maybe we should and then review, but it does seem to be somewhat, it's not an original premise, and I felt like this had been what the last time I think I heard about this, it felt like it was in production a really long time, which often means that there's problems.
Okay.
So, anytime there's like a lot of editing, re-editing, and delay in releasing a film, I think you have to question what's going on. But, you know, I'm willing to give it a shot and do a fun tearing apart review if you like.
Well, let's obviously check it out, see what it's all about. But as I said, I would still be partial to checking out and reviewing the Signal. Certainly, if not beforehand, then consecutively.
All right. So we are still currently, as Stuart mentioned, in our season of Outcast. The first season of Outcast. This is episode 5. They took a little bit of a break, and so for the 4th of July weekend, it looks like. So we watched the most recent episode, which came out July 8th. And do you want to kick this off, Stuart?
Sure. So as I mentioned, this is called The Road Before Us, and it was written by Craig Zobel and directed by Robin Veith. Faith? Nope, other way around. That guy was the or girl. That girl was the writer, and Craig Zobel is the director. They're getting a lot of film directors. These aren't like necessarily TV people because it was Howard Deutsch for the last couple episodes, and Julius Ramsey, I think, did another one, and then that other kid that we talked about. It's just an interesting mixture of directors that they have coming to do these, and we don't have any audience numbers yet because this just aired a couple days ago, and so that doesn't get published for a week or so. Um, Episode opens. What do you think of the title credits now that we've seen them a bunch of times?
Um, I think that they're fine. The audio is very quiet on them, and it just kind of it reminds me a little bit of True Detective with not quite as much noise.
Well, the True Detective also had what's his dude's name who does the music? Bear Grylls or something. What's his, oh,
Yeah,
fuck.
Bear Grylls.
That's not Bear Grylls. It's
That would be pretty awesome.
Bear McCready, maybe. Some dude who does a lot of amazing music for TV did the title for True Detective, and it was pretty fantastic.
Right. I'm not talking about the music. I'm talking about the visuals. But
But yeah, but it has. Yes, I agree that the visuals are similar to True Detective because they're using that same aesthetic of like the South. It's kind of swampy looking. In this case, it's more distinctively West Virginia because it's like rivers and steel towns and a little bit of rural urban blight. But then they flip everything upside down. Everything's kind of the whole filming, the cinematography approach of the show is desaturated. Like they're taking colors out of everything, so everything's a little bit gray. But I feel like it does set the mood for kind of like depressed rural West Virginia town that might be dying economically as well as from demon possession.
right.
So that's just what I feel like the title credits do a good job of that, and they have some interesting visuals with scenes upside down and the little creeping black goo that you can kind of sometimes you don't even notice it until it's like it's quite insidious, and again it's just a nice thematic introduction for the TV show.
Right. No, I agree. And it gives that little disjointed and kind of a little bit of a desperate, you get the feeling of what the world you're entering into by seeing these opening credits. So I think they did a pretty good job on them.
Yeah.
So, episode 5.
Episode 5, is it Bear McCreary?
You can't let it go, can you?
Not gonna let it go. Episode 5, it opens with Allison and Amber.
Yes.
And it's I have a theory about these two by the end of this episode.
I do too.
I kind of had the theory actually based on this scene, and then every subsequent scene with the two of them. I was like, oh yeah,
I think it's going this way.
I
Yeah,
think
I
it's
had the
the script
same.
on this.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I guess we should always, as usual, this podcast is full of spoilers, and since this is going to be coming out close to the airing of the show, you might not want to listen right away if because we're gonna speculate on what we're thinking. Me and HA are gonna be talking our mad accurate speculation game.
Right.
But yeah, the little girl is totally the demon in this scenario, or that's what they're trying to get us to think.
I think that's what they're trying to get to think. T-Bone Barnett is the music
Gosh
person.
darn it, T-Bone and Bear. How was I gonna? I wasn't gonna win.
Yeah, yeah. But still. Anyway, now do you feel better?
I do. Thank you. That's a weight off my shoulders.
Sorry for that interlude. Yes, agreed. I think that the theme that they're trying to give you here is that the little girl is possessed. The beginnings, but they're also giving you a little bit of. You're still not totally sure of Amber.
Into Allison until the end of the episode.
Sorry, Allison, and
Right.
you're still
because
not sure
of, because of her staring into the empty open refrigerator and the way she's brushing her teeth in those first couple scenes too, right?
Yep.
Like she has that kind of dead to the world, zoning out face look. So it's a good job. It's just that I guess the dialogue stuff that's happening is more of the clue for Amber.
Right,
Amber's
because
potential.
she's definitely so just in what we've seen with other characters that we know have demons possessing them, there is a lot of anger, a lot of swearing, a lot of like the thing that tips us off, at least here in the opening scene, is that she's playing with dolls and it's not happy play.
It's violent play.
It is violent play, and
there's some dialogue about don't drink the black poison, which
Yep.
almost they're definitely treading a line where they're not letting you know exactly.
Right, they're trying to line, but part of it is, part of it's also, and I do think that they, in some ways, I wouldn't say that they're overusing it. I understand why they're trying to build tension and that kind of thing, but they're always giving you a little bit of a hint, enough of a hint that you're like, oh, that's where it's going, but it could easily go in another direction. Like, is this acting out because of what she saw happen between her parents? Is this because she's possessed? I mean, my feeling is probably she's possessed, but, I think it's enough of a question mark. And it's also similar to what we saw with the Reverend and Kyle in their interactions with Mildred.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the Reverend's conversations with Mildred, where she's playing little word games with him. She could just be a kooky old lady, but she's probably demon spawn.
We also see that somebody's sitting outside in the car, and at first I thought it was going to be Sydney because he actually has been doing that before. But then
Yeah, he's a little bit of a stalker.
yeah. But then there's actually a really cool shot. I don't know if it registered for you of where Allison is closing the curtains after she sees them outside, and she's upset and she's closing the curtains, and then the camera kind of pans down, and then you see Kyle's face in the mirror, but it's Glenister, Reverend. I can't remember the actual Reverend's name, but I'll call him Glenister. And he starts talking. I just thought that was a really cool transition from.
It was a nice shot. I agree. I was like, oh, that was pretty sweet. Like, I really like what they are doing with their cinematography in this show.
Mm-hmm.
And the editing, I think, and the transitions are pretty clever and well done.
Yeah. That was cool, and Reverend's just telling Kyle, like, you're an idiot, don't do this. This is kind of the breaching your restraining order episode, like,
Yeah, totally, on every level.
over and over again. And so Reverend manages to persuade Kyle not to just go knock on the door of the house right then and there, which is
Right. And just to remind everybody, part of why they're kind of stalking Allison and Amber here is because with the discovery that Mildred is still, her inner demon is still alive and kicking, it was revealed in the last episode that the Reverend also was the person performing the exorcism on Allison. And so if that didn't take with Mildred, there's concern that Allison's in the house with the kid.
right. The thing that kind of sets up a lot of the drama for this episode is the priest, the Reverend says to Kyle, "I can prove to you that the other exorcisms worked. And so that's kind of like the main story driver for this episode is they
Right.
go around checking on old exorcism recipients to see if the demons are still gone.
Right. It's a little bit of a geocaching with demons kind of exercise.
Yeah, just doing some outreach. How are you feeling?
Right.
It's a pretty funny door to door sort of situation.
It is, and it's also sort of like there. It's funny in a way because we know that what has to happen is that at some point Kyle has to touch them so we can see whether the demons are there or not. And it's sort of like, how do you do this in a way that doesn't seem threatening?
Oh God, yeah, that whole mechanic. I mean, it works so seamlessly on some with some guys. Like Sherry's dad, he just shakes his hand because he's not a demon and he's totally
Right.
okay. But anybody who doesn't want to touch Kyle, you're like, okay, what's going on? But of course, he has a restraining order. His wife has a restraining order on.
Right.
So it is the most insane tension for this episode where when they do bump into each, they do talk more again in the episode later. You're like, oh, how is this supposed to work? Uh, oh, it's just the best, honestly. I really enjoyed this episode.
I did too. I really did a lot. And then there's also other. They are building the story with the Revenant Kyle running around chasing down his previous exorcisms, but there's also some more. We get some flashbacks and we get some more filling in with the narrative between Allison and Kyle and what happened. And part of how they do that is that Kyle's adopted sister agrees to go over and talk to Allison.
Yeah.
And, Kyle's basically like, look, I know I have a restraining order, but I'm worried about them. And so his sister's kind of like, all right, well, I'll go and do this, but you need to basically, back off. And so she goes over to the house, and it's really the tension that they build within that scene. What did you think about it? Because I was kind
Yeah.
of like, even if I really liked a person, I probably wouldn't be so psyched about that paint, that basically
stripper.
large razor blade, which is what it was, being in the house,
Yeah.
because Allison's stripping paint. And so she continues to hold this paint stripper in her hand, and I'm just like, And I mean, it's deliberate, obviously, but
Yeah, who actually talks? That was a little bit artificially framed. They
Yeah.
want to have a close up of Allison's pretty face, and they also want to have the paint stripper in the
and
shot.
it's strange. She's just holding it, and
So
it's kind of
she
weird
puts
and
her
awkward.
finger on her chin while she's talking, and she happens to be holding the paint stripper right in front of her face the whole time. So, but they're still trying to, and successfully making us think that Allison's weird because she is. She's like, I don't even know. I'm missing time. I feel like I'm floating. Nothing's holding me down. She's saying a lot of weird stuff.
Well, she's saying how she lost time, and she's lost, like, there's things that she can't access. And of course, part of what we're thinking is perhaps the reason why she can't access certain things is because she's still possessed. So that's sort of the obvious conclusion we're coming to. But, when later on the episode they show flashbacks to what happened or the aftermath of what happened between her and Kyle. I mean, we know that Kyle hit her.
I don't feel like we still do. We don't know that yet.
Okay, well, okay.
He's
Maybe
saying
we don't.
he hit her.
He's
but-
saying he hit her, but maybe it is the daughter. Maybe that's exactly what's going on here, and it's a little bit of a they're sending us down the primrose path in one direction, and little bit of a bait and switch here, but we don't know this yet when she's having the conversation with Kyle's sister. So
No.
so you're just kind of like, oh, maybe it's going down this way and that way, and she does say a lot of things that also fills in sort of more information about the relationship between her and Kyle, like that their daughter only listened to Kyle and that she's having a pretty hard time. And we already saw a bit of that in the beginning because the daughter's being pretty belligerent, or not belligerent, but just belligerent with her.
Yeah, well, it's pretty benign at first, where she's just like, "Oh, you're no fun," but then Allison responds. You think, "Oh, is she gonna flip out?" But no, then she just responds like with a playful mom voice, like, "Yeah, sometimes I have to be no fun on school nights or whatever,"
Right.
and it's fine, and like it goes over okay. But obviously that that thread continues in this episode, and obviously in the end of the episode, it doesn't go well at all.
No,
Um,
it gets much worse.
we also have the Chief Giles and the fire chief
That's
story
true.
continuing in this episode, and it starts. That one also kind of progresses pretty interestingly. You've got he goes by the firehouse and kind of gives the fire chief a bunch of shit about eating his food out of the refrigerator, and kind of poking. His questions aren't quite as subtle as they were before. Right? He's like, "Where's your watch?" "Oh, and I heard about that fire." Like,
Yeah.
they're obviously linked.
Yep.
And the fire chief's giving him a lot of looks, but he's just poking the bear to see what'll happen, I guess. He's not really getting much information.
Yeah, and it's not yet clear to me whether whether the police chief, whether he knows whether he's in on the demon possession piece of it or
But
not.
oh, right. I guess that's still a possibility.
Is he in on it? Does he know that his friend might be possessed, or does he just think maybe his friend has gotten into something over his head, or if his friend is protecting somebody? And it's still not totally clear. And again, this is where they walk that line, and they're walking that line between some of these interactions and the dialogue that happens between him and the fire chief.
And the second time they get together, it's later in the episode, but might as well just get it over with.
Right.
He goes and he's like ready to shoot. He unsnaps the clasp on his holster. He's like, so I can get access to my gun. But he goes over to the fire chief again, and he's basically convinced at this point that the girl Holter has discovered the fingernail belonged to
He's
is
dead.
is a murder victim. But I don't know why he goes there before. He tells Holter to like go and find out if she's just missing. But then he
Right.
still goes to the fire chief's house before he gets that confirmation, which he then gets while he's there, which like diffuses the situation. But it's a little weird that he's like, he finds out that there's no murder, there's no victim. It's just a house, it's just a hut that got burned down and a bunch of blood and weirdness.
Right.
So he just kind of has to walk away. But it's a bit of a strange turn of events since it was his idea for Holter to go and find more evidence.
Right, and it's also weird, agreed, that he didn't have confirmation before he went over there, which means maybe he's really convinced and sent Holter to do that, even though he thinks he knows the truth already or something like that. And then the interesting thing I thought was that we saw a very similar reaction, and like and granted, he is cutting down stuff with a chainsaw or something. And he's all sweaty and kind of weird, and it's parallel to the scene I thought between when Kyle and the Reverend go to visit one of the Reverend's other victims, the former pet store owner,
Yeah.
who is also sweating and kind of like not quite himself and acting a little bit off. And they find that he's been living in the pet store, which is now closed because his wife and he got a divorce. And this is one of those parts of the episode where Kyle's touch is pretty rough.
Yeah. Well, the dude doesn't want to shake his hand at first. The dude looks totally not great. And yeah, he's like living on Jelly Bellies and chips and just sitting in an armchair and watching TV in the back of the store. It's a very strange scenario. Yeah, but then when Kyle like runs up behind him and puts his hands on him, he's clearly possessed.
Yeah. And, the interesting thing I think about the people that are possessed is that we're seeing, like, there's definitely childlike behavior from them, or not all of them, because some of them seem to be able to manage whatever it is that causes them to be a little bit out of control. Maybe it's their impulses or whatever in order to, like, fake be normal. So Mildred seems to be the best at that we've seen, at least that we know of. But other people, like their language and their life skills, I guess, are off. So I guess if you see people living off Jelly Bellies that and other types of things, you can conclude they're a demon in this show.
Yeah, I guess so. That's one way to go. But yeah, it's kind of curious that the Reverend stops Kyle from. I guess he hadn't expected Kyle to walk up behind him and put both of his hands around his neck, or it was more like a massage, like a neck rub. But it wasn't like he was strangling him. But the Reverend basically tries to get him to stop, and I'm like, why are you doing this? You can see the black veins in his neck start to show.
Do you think
It's,
the Reverend is just still? I mean, he shouldn't be in denial at this point, but it still feels like he is.
yeah,
And I think it's maybe it's like a very scary thing to him, but maybe it's also a little bit of hubris because he was convinced that he had helped all these people, and clearly he hasn't.
yeah. It's obviously, and by the end of the episode, there's a very tough scene between Kyle and the Reverend that's a challenge for anyone who's like committed to something, to an idea, to have it be doubted so stridently in your face. We'll have to see. Like, I feel like the next episode we're probably going to have some changes in the Reverend's position. I
Well, we
assume.
are, and we also I think that this episode was filling in a lot of what the rules are in terms of the demons in
There was
this.
a big scene. I mean, it was a short scene, but it
But
was
it was a
really
big
important.
scene.
Yeah. When,
Well, first we saw a bit more of Sydney in this episode.
right, because he goes to Kyle's house and fixes like a crooked painting, and then lies down on his bed, and it's very unclear what he's up to.
Well, he's taking a look around the house. He goes into the closet where we remember Kyle was locked, and it's kind of odd that he's doing this. But then he goes and visits Mildred.
Yeah, and he says to her, he's like, I heard that Kyle came to visit you. They also have a conversation about all her little curios and tchotchkes, and it turns out that most of them she's acquired since she became possessed.
Yeah, and she's the one who says something like, "Oh, it's funny how these little things that you become accustomed to, and things that your passions, when you're, I guess, corporeal is the way." What I thought was interesting is like there must be a way for the demons to recognize each other. I don't know what it might be, but when the Reverend first pops up, she's kind of like, "Oh, who are you coming to my house?" And then she's immediately like, "Oh, I didn't realize who you were."
When Sydney gets there,
Yeah. Oh, sorry,
yeah,
Sydney, not the Reverend.
yeah,
Although he is dressed a little like a Reverend, so sorry.
yeah.
And so they have these conversations, but then the whole weird scene between them at the end was super strange, and I still haven't quite figured out exactly what's going on, although I have my suspicions.
Yeah. So the Sydney's just finished telling her, like, don't you worry about Kyle and the Reverend. They're my responsibility. I will take care of them. They should not bother you again. She then says, oh, then she tries to suck the breath out of him, but really it just looks like a kiss. It's not even close to what the demons do to Kyle. 'Cause there's
Right, and
usually
it
like
doesn't
a few
and it
inches of
doesn't
space.
yeah, and it doesn't look like there's anything that passed between them when
No.
she does that.
They both just seem to have a coughing fit and not feel very well afterwards.
Right. But what she says after it gives us a clue about what they're trying or what that is that they're taking from Kyle. So she basically implies that something big is coming up. What does she call it?
The merge.
The merge. And her body physically is not doing so well, and she's like, I'm not going to survive till the merge. And so I think she was trying to, and that you couldn't blame a girl for trying. So I think she was trying to get some substance out of the Reverend to keep her going. And
Out of Sydney.
sorry, out of Sydney, again. Sorry, I clearly think that they're similar, but
Yeah.
and I also, part of me is doubting the Reverend. Maybe it's just the Reverend's hubris, but maybe he's possessed too. You don't know.
Nope.
But I think what the demons, or my suspicion, what the demons are trying to do with Kyle is take some life force, something to keep them going. There's clearly some involvement with whatever he is that will help them continue to sustain. And we've seen now several times them trying to do that with him.
The demon at the end of this episode that they exorcise refers to him as the light, or we need your light.
Right.
But nothing we've seen has looked like a light. It's just like a weird, wobbly, see-through thing. But yeah, so
Well,
the stunt
and
double for Mildred was not 100% believable when Sydney
No.
throws her off of him. But that's okay. This show isn't about action scenes. I will forgive them that.
she did look a little bulky, no?
And her hair was just a whole different color.
Yeah.
Whatever.
But one of the things that occurred to me when they keep calling him the light, there's all the stuff with Lucifer and being the light bringer. Like, I wonder if they're making Kyle a little bit of an antichrist. Who knows?
Yeah, well, they're definitely bringing in a little more. We've had a reverend character this whole time, obviously, and sermons and demons going to his church. But we've got now Kyle saying if there is a God, he's a jerk.
Laughing.
Yeah. So we're getting a little more theological in the nature of the show. We'll have to see how much it keeps going in this direction.
Right. And also, I think we should mention what happens to the last exorcism victim, or whatever you want to call them, the homeless girl.
They go and find Sherry, who is the daughter of the first guy that they go to check in with. I guess she was supposed to be the first person they went to check in with as far as exorcism recipients, and it turned out she had gone off to live in Charleston on the streets. And
now, was it her fingernail that they found?
No, her name's Sherry, and the girl's name was Lisa.
Lisa. Okay. Sorry, I was trying to...
I thought there might be a connection there, too, but I don't think there was.
Okay. Continue.
And so, yeah, after they deal with Fish and Fins, or the Fur and Fins guy, Brian, the Reverend Kyle says, I'm going to Allison's, actually. And the Reverend says, I'm going to go and look for this girl, or I'm going to go downtown. And so I think he starts asking around to try and find her, while Kyle goes to Allison's house and really breaks the restraining order. And so that's a tough scene. That's where you start wondering, like, how is he going to just hold her hand? And in this scene, he comes into contact with Amber too, his daughter,
right?
Which might throw a wrench into our suspicion that she's also possessed. But I don't know if they ever actually touch skin to skin.
I don't either. But Amber's reaction and her comments to her mom are pretty rough here.
Yeah, she calls her a bitch, and she's a little girl, and that doesn't seem right at all. And I feel like Kyle does a lot of the right things, except for breaking his restraining order. He does back up Allison as a mother, and tries to diffuse the situation with the daughter. But of course, him being there is bad for all that.
Well, it's bad for all that, and also So even in talking to Allison, and she's clearly trying to figure stuff out. She doesn't understand everything that's happened, and she clearly still cares about Kyle, but she's scared of him. And so her flinching away makes sense, but of course we're trying to figure out whether it means something else.
And, what's not totally clear is Megan's daughter in the pilot says, you hurt your little girl and now you can't see her anymore. Yep. But Amber doesn't seem to have any negative feeling toward
Kyle at all. No.
Yeah. And we don't have any evidence yet that's what happened. It was from our flashback scene, it was Allison whose face was mangled, and we don't know anything about Amber getting hurt. So curious, we'll have to see what happens there too. But then, so that's like an unsuccessful attempt by Kyle to just lay hands on Allison. It doesn't quite work. He gets like her elbow through her sweater, and she reacts in a very negative way, which makes you wonder. This is the thing. It's you don't know. And he says it too to the Reverend after he goes back and meets him. He's like, the Reverend's like, so did she react the way they do? And he's like, it was hard to tell.
Right. So it's a mystery to him too.
Yeah. Yeah, so then they take to the streets looking for Sherry.
Right. And they find her, and things go as you might expect. It's kind of weird. But when Kyle touches her, it's clear what's happening. And then
it's a very interesting scene between, like, she does some floaty stuff, but then the black goo coming out of her, like, picks him up and tosses him around like it did in the flashback to his mother's.
Right, when he was a child. The thing I thought was a little weird, so the Reverend thinks that Kyle needs to hit the demons in order to get them out or something, which I thought it was his blood that was really
that's what
exorcism potion. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
I don't know why the Reverend seems to think it's just physical violence that punches them out of the soul. Out.
Yeah, maybe just because, as an audience, we get to see like the dollops of blood and the tears and all the little liquid contact that has made the big differences. And
maybe the Reverend doesn't know that. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, they managed to get the demon out, but Sherry is left a lot worse for wear. She's in a coma. So, So now we've seen a few different scenarios. We've seen the stuff that happened to Kyle's mother and how she was left. We've now seen what happened to Sherry. The only person I think we've really seen that is sort of okay after Kyle has been involved was the little boy in the first episode, right?
Joshua,
Josh.
yeah, and his black goo came out the same way, kind of as Sherry's, except that it just like smacked up onto the ceiling and didn't pick him up and throw him around. Didn't pick up Kyle, but as far as I can tell, it looked like a similar departure.
Right.
Through the mouth, black goo.
So, needless to say, Kyle's pretty upset at what happened to Sherry, and his day isn't going to get any better because he when he gets home sees the light on and sees that Allison's sitting on his porch.
Because we've also seen that Allison was taking out the trash and comes into her garage and sees the paint stripper and a pool of what looks like blood in the garage, and blood seems to trail all the way up the stairs into a bedroom, which is where we see
Now,
Amber.
what did you think was going? I thought she was going to be like killing an animal or something in there.
Well, I thought that we were going to see a raccoon that had been skinned, and that maybe that Allison had done this in one of her fugue states.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was going to be, but I thought perhaps something like that was going on. But I thought Amber was going to be. We were going to discover that Amber was responsible for the animals dying or something like that.
I honestly still kind of thought it could be Allison at this point. Mm. That she might have done this in one of her missing time moments, because we've already associated that paint stripper with her.
True.
Whatever. But yeah, then we get in there and it's just Amber, who's gotten a lot of progress actually on the wall, considering I don't know how long Allison had left her alone. Another one of these kinds of situations where she just took the trash out and she's managed to trail paint all the way up the stairs, down the hall, and paint like, I don't know, a quarter of 2 walls.
Yeah, and it's bright blood red paint, and like, do you notice that the bunny lamp had like the blood on it, and her hands are all over the wall? Like, it's pretty rough.
It is. It's very rough. That is a lot of money worth of carpet that needs to be replaced. Holy crap! That's my original thought. I'm like, that's like $5,000. So yeah, Allison reacts in a, I guess, understandable, a little overly violent. She kind of shakes the girl. She grabs her and kind of shakes her and says, "What are you doing?" And the girl reacts in a way that is kind of legit, but also a little animalistic.
Yep.
She screams, and then she runs on all fours into a closet and sits there crying. So, yeah, again, good. It's good work, good body language here, good acting. Allison, the actress who plays her, in the first scene with Amber, when you're not sure how she's going to react when her daughter says you're no fun, she has like emotion, like a quick body language thing that makes you wonder if she isn't going to flip out and rage. Yep. And then she has like the rational response, and in this case, she reacts, I think, like a lot of parents would react, looking at $5,000 worth of damage that their daughter has done.
It isn't just that, though. I think it's just the visual, thinking that you're coming up the stairs and you don't know what you're going to see. It's like a lot of fear. And then also, in addition to the anger, there was definitely a lot of fear there from Allison. And I don't blame her, because this is a super creepy scene to come upon. Even if your child is just being mischievous, to see this scene is so creepy, and, like, I would be scared. I'd be like, oh my God, what is going on here? Of course, she then goes to Kyle's, and I think that she understands that Kyle has some answers to what has happened. And we do see the flashback of her in the hospital, and she's had the tar beaten out of her, and like her whole face is all messed up, and all the police and the nurses are basically saying that her husband did this, and he's in custody and confessed. And again, we're left with this question, what actually happened? And she doesn't have the answers either. So I think, if you've been told that your husband did this to you, but he's never shown anything like this in the past, like, what are you going to do? And so, like, I thought that the scene between her and Kyle, this scene which ended the episode, was really interesting. Because she's asking him for answers, and he's not giving them at all. Because I don't know, what is he to say?
The audience still has to wait and hear what actually happened after, he came home from work and found them on the floor, and we don't know what was going on.
Right.
So I look forward to getting some answers too.
However, we did see full-on touching here.
Yep, and he's convinced that she is not possessed and she is safe. And so that really, I guess, that ultimately makes us wonder if it isn't Amber, the daughter, whose behavior has been just as, not just as, but has also been sketchy. And so now we'll need him to actually like hold her face in his hands, because I'm not 100% that they didn't. That
I
he
don't
didn't
think
just
they
hold
did.
her.
I didn't think that they were skin to skin either.
Yeah.
So, so I guess we'll have to wait and see. But I thought that this was an episode with just a lot of information, a lot of character building, a lot of tension building.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still really enjoying the series, even though it freaks me out a little bit. And I'm pretty positive we're going to see more demon children, which I love so very much.
Yeah. If it is Amber, cute little girl, yeah, this is not going to go well. Not for H.A. Conrad.
No. Well, I also had a thought that his niece might also have something going on.
Oh yeah.
Well, just the way she knows she's going to get him out of the house by saying something bad to him, and there's something a little bit antagonistic about the way she says the thing about his little girl.
Mm-hmm.
So part of me wonders if we're going to see more than one possessed kid running around. And, and if he is under scrutiny and his family is under scrutiny, like, I think that might make sense. Like maybe they're putting demon spies in key places around the town.
Everybody's a suspect.
Yep. So anyway, I'm cool with continuing to review this if you are, but I'm definitely enjoying this show.
Yeah, this is a great show. No doubt. It's a cool story, and they're teasing it out in a smart way. So I think we're going to continue along. So wrapping it up, I guess join us again next time when we continue our review of Outcast episode 6 in the show. That's going to be called From the Shadows It Watches. So that sounds totally terrifying.
I think we're going to see Sydney in this one quite a bit. That's my guess.
Yeah. And there's actually a short season. I think there's only 9 episodes for the whole season, so we're more than halfway there now.
Has it already been renewed?
I think so.
Because I think it should be if it has not. So, hopefully.
Actually, it's supposed to be 10 episodes, so maybe this is... let's see...
I think we might have already discussed this, but...
I think we might have too, but I'm not seeing it.
I don't remember.
It was renewed before its premiere, yeah.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So, get in touch with us. Let us know what you think of the show, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. You can leave us comments on our show notes at reanimatedpodcast.com, or hit us up on Twitter at reanimatedpcast.
Cool. And until next time, ciao.
All right. Bye, everybody.